down and you get back up again. Ooh, and you get back up again, but always new and dangerous one. Always new and dangerous one.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Three Tales Told podcast. We're here for episode 8. It's a gooder. We're back after a little 2-week hiatus, but we're refreshed. We got some good stories for you. I'm Shane. With me today, I have Jason and Sean. How are you guys doing?
Doing all right, Shane. How was yourself?
Sipping a drink and feeling fine.
Nice.
Just to note that the listeners will not even know that it's a 2-week hiatus, but we had a nice little break, but they'll have no idea.
It's fine.
So yeah, we're in for a doozy. I always say that every episode. I need a better catchphrase. I think Sean, you're starting us off.
I am. All right. So I'm going to kind of take you back to some of the simpler days when it comes to baseball and a little bit about the barnstorming days of the Negro Leagues. Now, the barnstorming when it comes to baseball, it kind of dated back to the 1800s, but its most prominent was kind of the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. Now, these barnstorming games, they would feature local teams. They'd play exhibition games against Negro Baseball League teams and just kind of all-star traveling teams that came out of the Negro Leagues. So now I'll just kind of give you an idea of what exactly the baseball Negro Leagues were. They ran from about 1885 to 1951, and they were so-called colored pro teams. Back then, with segregation, blacks and colored people were barred from Major League Baseball, so they basically had to start their own pro league. The final kind of pro colored team actually was named the Indianapolis Clowns. And actually they were more of like a humor sideshow. So kind of think the Harlem Globetrotters of baseball. So yeah, kind of the interesting part of these traveling barnstorming teams is they actually traveled up to Canada quite a bit and actually were quite prominent in the Canadian prairies, especially Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. So it wasn't, an unusual sight in the 1930s and the 1940s to see Negro teams. One in particular was the Kansas City Monarchs. They, just kind of speaking in Saskatchewan, they'd play in places like Regina, Saskatoon, even like Moose Jaw and Estevan, and even like Rosetown, even the smaller towns. What's really cool about this, and there's actually documented proof of this, is some of those big stars of that time who were maybe colored so they weren't Major League Baseball would actually play in places like Saskatchewan and these small town Saskatchewans. One person in particular is the great Satchel Paige. It was actually commonplace to see a guy like Satchel Paige take the mound for an exhibition game right here in Saskatchewan. I mean, just to give you an idea of kind of how good he was, he played in the Negro Leagues from 1926 to 1950. Before he was finally allowed to play Major League Baseball at the age of 42. And in his prime, while playing in the Negro Leagues, his record as a pitcher was 100 wins and 50 losses, which is just like unheard of. And he did in the I believe it was around 1963, brought an all-star team up to the North Battleford area and played some exhibition games in North Battleford and Unity. He did play, he was kind of on his downslide at that time around 1963. He played his final Major League Baseball game in 1965. But yeah, I just thought it was kind of a glimpse into, the fact that, we actually had some baseball royalty play in these small towns in the prairies way back in the, 30s and 40s.
That's really cool, Sean. I didn't even know that they came up here. The notion of seeing sports is, I call sports one of the great, unifiers of society, in a way, because you look at like a boy growing up in 1930s Saskatchewan. I mean, he is awfully bright out there. If you catch my breath, if you catch my drift there, it's awfully bright out there. So to see these people of color and being sports heroes, probably, dare I say, probably changed minds or softened the hearts of maybe prejudiced thinking.
Yeah, no, for sure. And kind of the reason I brought up, say, Satchel Paige is, I mean, this is probably one of the greatest baseball players of all time. So could you imagine going to Rosetown to watch probably one of the greatest ball players ever to take the field?
It would
It's
be
just
like
mind-blowing.
in Kindersley growing up and like Michael Jordan has just stopped into the gym and is
Yeah,
playing
or
like an exhibition game and just dunking on everyone.
yeah, or
It would be like hard to even fathom that, right?
or like in baseball terms nowadays, like Derek Jeter coming to Kindersley with the New York Yankees and saying, "Hey, let's play some baseball."
Yeah, that'd be crazy.
You said he was 42 when he got in?
42 when he finally was able to play Major League Baseball. Yeah,
How long of a career did he have after that?
he joined the major leagues in. He must have joined it shortly after he left the Negro League in '51. So he was probably in his 50s there.
And what's the, like, I guess nowadays the average athlete, they play what, into like their early to mid 30s? Some of them make it to 40.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
you
yeah.
got to be a special exception to make it to 40.
Yeah, you got to be like almost like a in baseball if you're a pitcher, because that's what Satchel Paige was, a pitcher. You'd have to be. I mean, you think of like Roy Halladay, and he's like a kind of a specialized pitcher, right, Sean? Like
Yeah,
he would throw the knuckleball.
Roy Halladay wasn't a knuckleballer. I'm trying to remember his name now. He played for the Jays not that long ago. But yeah, basically I remember a story about this guy. He's saying that he was told by pitching coaches, if you want longevity, learn how to throw a knuckleball. It's not as strenuous on your arm.
That's still quite a long career for a baseball player or any athlete, really. Like, how many athletes do you know that made it past their prime, like well past their prime? I mean, given he was only allowed to join in his early 40s, but still, he was playing well before that.
Yeah, like the only person I could think of baseball wise is probably Nolan Ryan. I think he was in his late 40s when he retired, I'm pretty sure, if he didn't reach 50.
Yeah, he was really old.
Yeah, and the weird thing was he was a power pitcher, so how he didn't, well, he in the end he did blow out his arm, but how he didn't blow it out, in his
Well,
mid 30s.
he was through it so fast and so hard that even when he was slowed down, he was probably throwing heat.
No, exactly.
I think of, I don't think he had that long of a career. Well, maybe he did, but I think of Cal Ripken Jr., right? Obviously. I mean, he's literally known for having a really long streak of games played.
Yeah, he's the only one in a while, but then again, he wasn't a pitcher either, so
Yeah.
it's not as hard on your arm.
Well, yeah, like it's amazing how, like, just the repetition, the accuracy, and then also just how tiring it is.
Yeah, for sure. And for someone like Satchel, uh, he was so good for so long. Like you said, that longevity.
But when I think of longevity, or I think of like old playing sports, I immediately think of Gordie Howe, right? I mean, didn't he play with his son? Like, that's crazy.
He played pro hockey into his 60s. I mean, on and
Yeah.
off. He was on and off at that point. But yeah, he was in his 60s before we finally hung him up.
Like, he was in the NHL at 50, I think, for the Hartford Whalers or something like that.
Yep.
That's got to be some kind of record.
I think it might be. I mean, they might find some other obscure sport where, but I know basketball really well, and no one was playing in their 50s. So
Any sport in general is really hard on your body. It doesn't matter what position you're playing or what sport it is. Like, you move wrong even the slightest and you trip and blow out your knee, or you throw wrong and blow out your arm, or like it's hit somebody too hard and get a concussion. Like all of that adds up.
Oh God, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Sean, I have a question back to the barnstorming games. Did I don't know, maybe you might not be able to answer this, but did when they played these Negro League teams, like did they played ML like major league teams or pro teams or whoever? Was it competitive, or was it a sideshow? Was it taken seriously, or was it kind of like you mentioned the Harlem Globetrotters? I've been to 2 Harlem Globetrotters games, and it's not taken seriously, right? It's a joke. Like it's fun and it's super entertaining. It's for children and it's like wildly entertaining, but it's not competition.
Yeah, I see what you're getting at, and I think in those latter years, like I said, when the Indianapolis Clowns were doing it, it was more of a sideshow, like the Harlem Globetrotters, where there wasn't really competition; it was more fun, right?
Yeah.
In the early years, it was a little bit more competitive in the fact that because of the segregation, there wasn't many places they could play, so they were just looking for places to get that extra, game in or whatever, to keep sharp and keep their skills up. So how do you do that? You just start traveling from town to town and find competition.
Right.
So yeah, it's kind of a weird answer, I know, because it's kind of a little from column A and a little from column B, depending on which era of barnstorming you're looking at.
Well, yeah, you're looking at a big swath of time for sure. But I can imagine that, like if you had a Negro League team playing, a pro team, they're not going to want to they definitely don't want to get beat badly,
Oh,
especially in the time when, these people, people of color were not even allowed to play in the leagues because people thought they were lesser people or not even people, right?
well, yeah, exactly. I mean, they were just playing against like other local teams, like finding whatever you can. Like I know they said one story, like the Negro teams would show up in like dilapidated vehicles and they'd have no place to stay. And these local teams would say like, here, we can drive you around. Here's a place to stay.
Showing respect for your opponent,
Yeah, exactly. Just kind of helping these guys out. Like, even though they were really great ball players, they really, and quote unquote pro players, they really didn't have much.
Well, and also talk about love for the game, right? Like to be that dedicated and to play for as long as some of these guys did. Like I don't even know if they were ever expecting to get into the major leagues but like you said, to come in this beat up rundown car and no place to stay and all you got is, your team uniform, if they even had that, and your catcher's mitt, and to be committed to that for that long.
No, I think you made a good point there, Shane. Because a lot of these guys, I'm sure, hoped to make it in the major leagues, but because of what was going on down south, they didn't know. Like, as far as they knew, they would never make it to the majors just because of the color of their skin. And I mean, it wasn't until Jackie Robinson broke that color barrier in 1947 that it's like, oh, well, maybe there is a chance.
It's really too bad. Just think of all the great teams there could have been if there wasn't that barrier, if people weren't divided by color.
Well, yeah, exactly. You see some of these guys. I know there's a few Negro League players that are now in the Hall of Fame, but just to see what they could have done if they actually played in the big leagues, would have been something to behold.
It kind of reminds me of that Olympic event that Adolf Hitler attended and a black guy won it or something. I don't know if that's true, but it's a story that I heard, and just how furious he was and how...
Yeah, you're talking about one of the greatest sprinters ever, Jesse Owens. Yeah, he humiliated Hitler. Actually, Hitler purposely left before the race began because I think he saw him running and knew, oh, we're effed. So he didn't want to be seen being humiliated, so he actually left so he couldn't see him win. And then he actually said like condescending, nice words about him. That's actually a pod in itself. One of us needs to pick that up and make that an episode. The fact that Jesse Owens just sunned Hitler in Germany in the 1936, I think, Berlin Olympics. Yeah, that's a great story. Yeah, he was a hell of an athlete. And oddly, there was like a handful of black baseball players before 46, but they never really made that leap, like it never really, you know, it wasn't Jackie Robinson, who was like also an amazing player, right?
Yeah, they just didn't make that same impact that Jackie did.
Yeah. Well, that's a great way to start the pod. Thank you for everything there, Sean, about enlightening us and telling us about the barnstorming days of baseball. Very cool.
Awesome. Hope you guys enjoyed it.
All right, Shane, you're up, man.
Cool. All right. For mine, I am going to be talking about William Hope Hodgins, sailor, poet, author, bodybuilder, and a soldier in World War I. William was born in Essex, and he was the son of an Anglican priest who acted as a parish to 11 different churches in 21 years, moving the family all over England. At age 13, William ran away from boarding school in order to become a sailor, but he was caught and returned to his father. Now, surprisingly, his father acquiesced to William and allowed him to begin a 4-year apprenticeship as a cabin boy. Now, during his tenure at sea, William discovered he had a hitherto unknown phobia of ocean water. On top of that, he was bullied incessantly by his superiors. And on top of that, his dad died a year shortly after he left to go do this, basically leaving his family impoverished. But William was determined, and after returning home from his 4-year apprenticeship, he studied for 2 years at Liverpool. And after he received his mate's certificate, William endured 7 more years at sea. And this is kind of where his bodybuilding came into play. In order to combat bullying, he began a strict exercise regimen of lifting weights, boxing, and wrestling. He actually got so big and so strong that he was actually able to eventually turn the tables on his tormentors. In addition to his exercises and bodybuilding at sea, William also practiced photography. He took pictures of cyclones, sharks, lightning storms, and the aurora borealis. William was also awarded a medal for saving a fellow sailor who fell from the topmast into shark-infested waters. After he returned home, William opened up what was known as a school of physical culture, or as we like to call it today, a gym, where he trained members of the Blackburn Police. And while he was training the police, William actually appeared on stage next to Harry Houdini. So what had happened was Houdini was touring England, and he just kind of put out a challenge that said, like, bring your own handcuffs and I will escape from them. Now, prior to this, Houdini had actually visited the Blackburn Police Department and was actually he was able to escape from one of their jail cells, and they did not like him for that. So when he issued this challenge, an officer gave William a pair of rigged handcuffs to put on Houdini. They gummed the locks and they put wire around it. So it would be basically impossible for Houdini to be able to pick the locks. Now, this is where William kind of turns into a bit of a dick. He grabbed Houdini's arms and basically ripped them behind his back so harshly and so tightly that Houdini literally lost circulation in his upper body and feeling in his arms, like, instantly. And then William just, like, when he put these cuffs on Houdini, he squeezed them on, like, as hard as he could. It took hours before Houdini could finally escape from the cuffs. Like it was, I think they said like 7 hours for him to do this. And when he was finally done, his wrists were bloody. And during the performance, like they had to open up the curtains and assist him like a number of times, like giving him something to drink and helping him stand up so that it would like kind of return circulation to his body. And when he did finally get out of his cuffs, William wasn't even there. Like, he basically just slapped on the cuffs and fucked off. Unfortunately for William, he wasn't really able to earn a lucrative living while training policemen. The work was seasonal, and his gym was actually closed during the winter months. So after 5 years of personal training and bodybuilding at his school, William shut it down to become an author and poet. And he was actually... critically, he was acclaimed, but as most authors, he was pretty damn poor. But 2 of his stories, The House on the Borderland and The Nightland, were received very well. And you can look them up, and I think, don't quote me on this, but I think they are public domain. I think you can read them online. And he did this right up until, like, he was writing stories right up until World War I. He wrote, a lot of his stories were based on his experiences at sea. And when World War I came on, William stopped writing. He enlisted in the war, but he was thrown from a horse, and he broke his jaw and injured his head and was discharged. And after that, William began writing again, biding his time as he healed, and he actually re-enlisted into the war at 40 years old. Unfortunately, he was killed after he was struck by an artillery shell. So that was the end of William and the end of my tale.
That is pretty badass. Add badass to that resume.
A real Renaissance man.
He's quite an interesting guy. In the 40 years that he was alive, he did a lot of different things.
I think Harry Houdini rubbed people the wrong way because I wouldn't say he was arrogant, but he challenged people, and, you know, people tried to make a fool of him. Like, it wasn't the first time he had challenged people, right? I mean, this was part of his shtick, right? So to see people do that to him, I am not surprised. I've never heard that story, though. And I love Houdini's stubbornness to not just go, well, you clearly rigged this against me. Like, come on, give me like a proper handcuffs, like not something that's been like booby trapped or whatever. And the fact that he just stayed on for 7 hours. I know this is about William Hodgson, but I just wanted to say that side note about Harry Houdini, another badass guy.
I had to actually do some extra digging on that story because the Wikipedia article doesn't really say much about it. My reference was actually another podcast. They were covering one of his books, and this story was mentioned and elaborated on a little further. So that's where I got my information about it from.
I just kind of found it interesting after 7 hours and everything rigged against him, Houdini still found his way out.
Yeah, he kind of still could say, yeah, I did get out of him. It's like, you chopped your hands off. Well, I got out of them.
The thing that I forgot to say, and you made me think of it when you were talking about Houdini, is when he issued this challenge and, you know, William and this bodybuilding assistant showed up with these cuffs, like, Houdini actually did kind of make a bit of a fuss out of it because he was like, hey, man, like, you rigged these handcuffs. And William was like, you said bring a pair of handcuffs. You didn't say, you know, what condition they had to be in. You didn't say anything about that. And Houdini was like, okay, well, I'll make it work somehow.
I just also love the fact that he was afraid of water.
Yeah.
That's hilarious to me.
Like he didn't even really, I don't think he knew what he was getting into becoming a sailor because I mean, clearly he didn't stick with it, but
that's amazing. Now, is he known in the bodybuilding community as like an OG bodybuilder? I mean, we all know how jacked you are, Shane. So, I mean, as a fellow beefcake, do you do you know if he's known in the bodybuilding community?
I don't actually, but if you look up his name and on Google and then hit bodybuilder, he actually wrote articles on bodybuilding and exercises, and they were published in magazines. And there's like photographs of him like demonstrating on like how to lift properly and all of this other stuff. And I just thought it was kind of funny because you got this dude who was like also an author, who's also a bodybuilder, in these photographs in this like leotard kind of thing, like demonstrating on how to lift a medicine ball properly.
I was gonna say I enjoyed the story how he even got into bodybuilding. How he was bullied, so he decided to get jacked and get some revenge.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of the most impressive thing he ever did, aside from re-enlisting in World War One. I mean, that's pretty badass too. But
Another guy who needs a movie about him for sure, right? Also, I wonder, like, I think it's like what 1900s when bodybuilding was kind of starting to become a thing. So he's probably one of the first, kind of guys to do it.
I would say so. Like his bodybuilding career, I think started in like 1902, 1904, something like that.
He's
I know.
got to
I
be
guess
one of the first. And to go from like basically swole gym dude to poet. I mean, like, can you imagine like John Cena all of a sudden is writing poetry and like and like novels? Like The Rock has poetry.
Yeah, like somebody you wouldn't expect. Like when you picture an author or a poet from that time, you're thinking like this dude with like a receding hairline, and he's got like the circular glasses or a monocle or something, and he's like either really slender and effeminate or he's like really old and chunky, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's no in between with these guys, and yet like William kind of was. And one of the reasons, actually the main reason he was bullied so much was actually because he was he was a pretty boy. Like they said he had a handsome face. And I don't know why that would make you a target for bullying specifically, but that was the reason that was listed. So
probably jealousy or whatever,
well, maybe.
Sean, anything else to ask?
Oh, awesome story.
Great
Thanks.
stuff, man. Yeah, we'll come back and then it'll be my turn to wrap her up, boys. All right, guys, two great tales. Let's see if I can finish her off with a third one here. In 2010, a movie came out. You guys might have remembered it, called Kick Ass. It starred like Aaron Johnson. He's like this dorky guy, and he decides to become like a real life superhero. Nick Cage was also in it, and Chloe Grace Moritz was in it as well. She was like this little girl who like would kill people, and basically the main character wanted to become a superhero. He wanted to become a real life superhero. Little did the makers of this film know that it kind of spurred this subculture of real life superheroes, RLSH, and a community of everyday people going out, dressing up as superheroes, and essentially fighting crime. Now, this was really big in like 2010, 2011, probably peaked in 2012, and even like now there was a new book that was written by a Canadian author. I believe his name is Peter Nowak. The book is called The Rise of the Real Life Superheroes and the Fall of Everything Else. And he just profiles these people who dress up as superheroes, and I suppose when we get down to it, most of them are what we call service type superheroes. They dress up and they do charity. And a lot of them are like they dress up in their persona. For example, the Crimson Fist, originally based out of Atlanta, now in San Francisco, does a lot of like charity. You know, there's a guy named Life out of New York. They give water, you know, treats, snacks, granola bars to homeless people, beds, you know, a lot of charitable stuff, and they do it on their own dime. So the majority of these superheroes are what we call charitable people, and I want to talk about a couple of them, just to give them a little bit of light here. One of the original, I suppose, charitable superheroes, the OG, as they say, is a guy named Master Legend, and he's kind of a crazy guy. He says his origins is like all mystical, and like he says it with conviction, so you might think this guy is actually kind of nuts. He's based out of Orlando, Florida, and I guess he's still kind of around doing stuff. Another one was a guy named, he went as Superhero. His name was Dale Popel, and later on he then became Old Superhero. And he was a former wrestler, and I think he tore his Achilles and he couldn't wrestle anymore. So then he started doing like, he became like a crime fighter type guy when he was younger, and like just kind of reckless and basically looking for trouble. And there is a theme with a lot of these people, is they do seem to have trouble past. Dale himself was a victim of abuse, and you know, he was an inspiration to many people. And unfortunately, in 2020, he unfortunately took his life. But he was definitely inspiration and a great man. Are there any in Canada? You guys are probably immediately wondering. There was a guy named the Crimson Canuck. I understand he was retired. He was out of like Toronto. There was a guy named Polar Man. He would like shovel driveways of snow. And there's like a group in Toronto called the Trillion Guard. So like some current guys, a guy named Canadian Justice and Urban Knight. Those are two different guys. They're out of Toronto. And yeah, I looked in, there was like some guy on some database in Calgary, and I can't even remember his name, and he didn't even really have a photo, and I've never heard of him. And yeah, there was apparently a guy out of Saskatoon called Anonyman, and although I could only find about 2 references of him. And to the bigger point about all this is that research is very difficult. A lot of these people come in and out of the game. I mean, there was a project called the Real Life Superhero Project that kind of gave more of a light to these people and took their photos. There was a girl named Nyx, but she, from what I understand, is inactive, and her husband, I forget his name, I'm sorry. He is also inactive, so a lot of them are inactive. They come in and out. You know, you don't really hear from them. Another, probably the most well-known Canadian, though, is this man named Thanatos, and I don't even think people know his real name. He's in his, like, I assume at this point, 70s or late 60s. He was an older man when I first heard about him. And essentially, he's another charitable type superhero. He was based out of Vancouver, and one day he was talking to a police officer, and a police officer gave this kind of, I would say, apathetic kind of attitude about the homeless people. He said, these homeless people only have death to look forward to. And he decided to call himself Thanatos, which is Greek for death. So he said, well, if people are going to look forward to death, then I will be death. And he wears like this kind of black cowboy hat with like a green kind of skull looking face mask and like a black trench coat. Some other people of note, I guess I could describe them a little bit, but yeah, I don't really, you can look them up, like look up all, like there's certain websites that have like databases of real life superheroes. RLSH is kind of what they're called, and you'll probably find a lot of stuff. And in your research, if you ever do look into it, you will find probably the most well-known, a man named Phoenix Jones. His name is Ben Fodor, He's actually an MMA fighter, and he's under the category of crime-fighting superheroes. He said, "I am the only superhero. The rest are LARPers with bags of food." So he definitely kind of an arrogant fellow. He went by the name Phoenix Jones, based in Seattle. He'd wear this mask and like bulletproof vest, and he'd literally go out and apparently he had somewhere of almost about 200 collars, 200 arrests to his name. He's stopped, rapes and assaults and muggings and a lot of things. But here's where the story takes a hilarious, well, if not tragic, twist. In January 9th, 2020, Ben Fodor, aka Phoenix Jones, was arrested for selling drugs to a police officer. Yes, the great Phoenix Jones, a hypocrite among the superhero community, and he kind of got ousted for that. And he was selling MDMA to a cop. I think his girlfriend also had cocaine at the time. Now, of course, this is like, I don't know if he's actually convicted. I didn't really dig too much into that. There's rumors that he's actually kind of still trying to go out there as Phoenix Jones. I mean, this was a guy where a comic was actually made of him, a documentary movie. Like, he was very well known in the real life superhero world, and probably the most well known. So the fact that he was arrested for selling drugs is just so unbelievably hypocritical and, quite frankly, hilarious. And I mean, just another story for 2020. So not really a history story for you guys, but maybe just a little enlighten people that there is a world of real life superheroes. And I think, Shane, if you recall, I might have mentioned Phoenix Jones. This is before he was arrested. Back then he was probably in his peak of his career, and how I kind of wanted to do it. Like, I was young, I was bored, like, you know me, I would just spend my life in my room, right? In my 20s, like, we lived together right in Calgary, and I kind of wanted to go out there and, like, not wear a costume, but, like, help people, or, like, literally try and stop. Because in our area, and Shane, like, I'm going to bring you guys in now, that's my story, but Shane, remember we had so many hookers outside our place, you know?
I remember being chased by a pimp.
You might as well tell that story. I mean, let's just throw it in here.
Yeah, I remember the hookers. I don't remember ever hearing about the pimp story, so I want to hear the pimp story.
It was right after we moved into that area. It was south of the tower, the Calgary Tower. It was right beside the Stampede grounds.
Yeah.
And at the time, they were trying to clean up the neighborhood by putting in these new condos and getting, like pubs and restaurants and coffee shops in there.
Yeah.
And Jason and I moved in kind of like towards the beginning of this, and we had moved all our furniture in and kind of hung up all our stuff on the wall. And it was a weekend, and I decided I was going to go out at night like an idiot, not knowing the neighborhood at all or its history. And I thought I was going to take a walk and kind of get my bearings and see what there was to see. And yeah, like on every corner there was a hooker or 2 or 3 hookers, and they would like catcall me, and like I didn't know what to say or what to do, so I just kind of ignored them for the most part. And then I'll never forget her. She was like this blonde woman. She was wearing this tight red leather dress that came down to her knees with like a zipper in the front, and like it hid nothing. Like her figure, like you could see her rolls like bulging against the leather of this dress, and she had these white 60s thigh-high leather go-go boots and with a zipper on the side. And she said something to me. She was like, "Honey, loving pays my bills. How about you?" Or something like that. Like, and I kind of looked at her, and I started walking towards her, and then she had this like look, like I don't know what changed her attitude or her mind. Like, I guess there was something about me, and she was like, "Oh fuck, this guy's walking towards me." And all of a sudden this dude from across the street. Like he must have had like some kind of sixth sense, because I turned my head and I saw him and he made eye contact with me and he just started running at me. And she was pointing at me. She's like, this guy. And I'm like, oh, fuck. So I just started running. And I think I ran all the way to that, if you remember, Jason, there where you used to play basketball.
Yeah.
Like I ran all the way to that church. And like, I think I went past it into that bridge that was into that park. And I was like huffing and puffing because I was out of shape. Like I was just this skinny ass punk that sat in an office. And yeah, I escaped the beating of a pimp.
And you didn't walk towards her to talk to her, right? Like you were just trying to avoid her or what?
Yeah, like I kind of just, like I looked at her and I had never in my life up until that point seen or looked at a hooker ever. And I don't remember very clearly why I even was walking towards her, really. I think it was just more like is this real kind of thing? Like I must have wanted to talk to her and be like, and like ask her, like, are you a hooker? Like that must have been my thought, because I don't remember why I did it. And yeah. Sorry, Jay, I don't mean to steal your thunder with my story, but like.
No, I brought it up. I brought up that I wanted to kind of go out there and like clean shit up. Like it was kind of this mentality of what a lot of these people have, but you know, I didn't obviously go through with it. I had more common sense or lack of courage, or however you want to peg me. I don't know.
But kind of along those lines, and I'm kind of glad you brought up kind of the Phoenix Jones thing, is, you know, how many of these guys are actual crime fighters? Because as in, you know, Joe off the street, that could be pretty dangerous.
Well, Phoenix Jones got, like, basically he had to learn how and work with the police because, like, as he tries to stop, like, he got in trouble for, like, pepper spraying someone, you know, like, he's gotten in trouble, like, in the past for, like, too aggressive. So, like, generally the crime fighting guys, like, they are almost always in contact with the police, and, like, the police prefer them not to be there. Obviously, the police kind of feel like it's their duty, but a lot of these guys are in a response to lack of police presence. A lot of the crime fighter ones are quite frankly thinking the police are not doing enough, so they go out and clean the streets themselves. And in terms of like recently, two real life superheroes named Red Ranger and Justice Service out of Seattle, they're part of like the Rain City, I think they're called the Rain City Crew or something like that. I'm sorry, I don't recall. But they were helping people in like the George Floyd protests. Remember, that was really big earlier this year when a lot of cities were essentially, there was riots, bad actors rioting, and a lot of peaceful protesters. I watched some videos of them helping people being basically tear gassed by police and helping people like flush their eyes and take care of them as police were throwing flashbangs at people and, you know, trying to disperse crowds, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I was just kind of thinking of the safety aspect of it too. Probably goes back to why the police kind of probably prefer them not to be around. Is if you're just Joe Schmo. I mean, Phoenix Jones is another story because he's an MMA fighter. He can handle himself, but it can be a dangerous job.
Well, even just helping the homeless. I remember, now that you talk about this, Jason, I read an article years ago when I was still living in Calgary about a girl who dressed up in costume. And I think she was one of probably what you call like the OG of these superheroes. And she would like deliver food to the homeless. And a lot of like people back then were kind of like, you know, leaving their comments. And one of them was like, you know, this girl is actually really beautiful in and out of costume. And the homeless are, and I don't want to give them a bad name, a lot of them have had a very shitty life and their circumstances are not good, but a lot of them also aren't in their right mind.
Yeah.
You know? So there is somebody had kind of commented like she was putting her own safety at risk by doing this. You know, like they said, it's a noble thing to do to feed the homeless, but you know, in tight leather spandex and a purple wig, it's kind of
Yeah. Unfortunately, that is the reason why there is not many female real life superheroes. And yeah, you're definitely right there, Sean. When it comes to the police, they don't want people around. It's a safety thing, and they feel like they can do the job, and they're trained for it. So, and like, I mean, a lot of these people are also not in their right mind in a way. Like, some of them have delusions of grandeur. I mean, Phoenix Jones was kind of like that. Some of them kind of have this like mentality where they kind of just are a bit reckless and troubled and kind of crazy in a way, for lack of a better word.
I think you have to be a little bit crazy to do it, because when you read a comic book or you watch a movie, or as a kid you watched a cartoon of, like Superman or Spider-Man or Batman, like you're able to suspend your disbelief because it's not real. And so you can kind of take it for what it is and accept it on the grounds of fantasy. Whereas this, it's kind of like when you post, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, Jason just kind of beforehand sent Sean and I a link to this website where you could see some of these active superheroes. And it's, when I got it, I was kind of, and I mean, no disrespect to these people, they're doing what they think is good work, but I was like, is this somebody's cosplay photo reel? Like, what is this? Like, like,
Some of them are absolute, like, I would say, for lack of a better word, again, like they're basically dorks playing dress up. I mean, a lot of them really are like that.
Yeah, that's basically what I kind of thought about some of them. I was like, you must have a screw loose, because they're going out into the real world, and I don't know if they're expecting other people to take them seriously or not, but just to kind of put yourself into that scenario, like say you decide to do this and you have this really elaborate costume and you're going to go out there and you're going to fight to make a difference, however it is you're going to do that, and suddenly you're not received the way maybe you were hoping. Like maybe people are kind of laughing at you a little bit, and maybe, I don't know, maybe it probably does take a really brave person to go out and do that. But
well, like when superhero Dale Popol was asked, like, why do you do it, he would say, well, I want to do it for the people. And then he's like, at some point I just gave up on saying those answers and said, it's really fun. And for them, some people, it's really fun. I mean, for some people, getting high is really fun, and for some people, fighting crime is really fun, and doing it in a costume is just adding that kind of little bit of freedom. I mean, to me, if you're not hurting anyone, and most of them people are really being helpful, and they're really being kind of angels, toward homeless people or disadvantaged people, so I say more of the power to them. But yeah, it is kind of funny, and some of the costumes and personas are definitely not the ones I would come up with.
Well, just kind of to add to that, these guys are just kind of doing the service thing, like helping the homeless or helping the elderly, what have you. Maybe just putting on that costume puts a smile on someone else's face.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I don't mean to tear these people down. Like I recognize they're doing good deeds, but if it was me, I'm just saying, like, I would be discouraged very quickly, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to have some thick skin, because people are going to probably mock, and
And they always do. I mean, that's just the world we live in. But
yeah, you kind of mentioned about laughing. I mean, it's probably that type of person that's able to laugh at himself that could do something like that.
Yeah.
You see someone laughing at you, you're like, yeah, you know what? It's just kind of funny.
I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, when we put ourselves out there, we have to expect that there will be people who will just, their sole purpose is to just crap on you. And, honestly, like when I see people who are dressing up then maybe, yeah, they're like an overweight guy, overweight kind of nerd. But if he's dressing up as some sort of character he came up with and he's helping people, he's doing a lot better than the jackass on the behind the keyboard making fun of him. And at the end of the day, that guy's winning in life. So yeah, like we're gonna put our podcast out there, and there's gonna be tools who will say, "Oh, I hate Jason and I hate Sean and blah blah blah." Sounds like a retard or what, you know. But like honestly, are you making a podcast and are you getting together with your friends? Do you have friends? You know, like at the end of the day, those people are absolute losers. Like I say, if there is any real life superheroes out there, you know, keep doing what you're doing, and you know, like we support them. But obviously, like, you know, if you have a whack persona and a whack costume, you know, Shane and I, we know design and we know that kind of stuff. So, you know, we'll reserve judgment. So sorry to some of the whack personas and whack costumes, but you know, you have a blank slate. You can be whatever you want. Shout out to Thanatos. He's pretty awesome. Definitely look him up. He's pretty cool. And the guy out of Saskatoon, if you're real, please hit us up. Anonyman. I don't know if you're real or what. There's no picture of you, but apparently you exist. I want to know if you are an actual real-life superhero or if you're just literally nothing.
Either way, it would be really cool to be contacted by one of these guys, I think.
Oh yeah, when this goes out, if this ever gets traction and we hear from some people, if we could ever get to the point where we could have guests and stuff, that would be pretty cool. I wouldn't mind talking to some of them.
Yeah, me either.
I doubt
Yeah,
someone
I'm sure
like
that's a
Phoenix
great
Jones
story.
would, but you know, I have a lot of questions for Phoenix Jones. I mean, you should see some of his, like, he used to like live stream his like patrols and like just the stuff that he'd get into with his like Emerald City crew, I think they were called. I can't remember what his crew was called, but yeah, like just some crazy stuff. It takes a special kind of person to do that, to help people, and then also like just dress up and like do that. Like you should definitely check out some of his videos, and we'll link to some of the videos of some of these real life superheroes. But on that note, I'll just wrap it up here. I think we had a nice, good long show. I hope you guys enjoyed that, and hope maybe I inspired some of you guys to put on a leotard and kick a pimp in the nuts.
I would say this is one of our more inspirational podcasts. I think we talked about some really amazing groups of people and other people just in general. This was a good one.
I
Oh,
agree.
for sure. On that note, I am Jason here in Calgary.
I am Sean here in Marquis, Saskatchewan.
I am Shane here in Etonia, Saskatchewan.
Thanks for listening, guys. You just heard 3 Tales Told.
Peace.